Sup nerds, I'm Tom. There's a new TMG game out called Aristocracy. Let's talk about it. So this game is from Reiner Knizia. It's a bit of I don't know how to explain it. It's a very light and very luck-based game. You have this board here with all these little tokens put face down, these little squares in this big, huge grid. Obviously, I'm not going to do it right now. It's going to take forever. But on your turn, you're going to flip up 3 of these tokens kind of at random. I mean, you get to choose which ones, but you don't know what they're going to be on the other side. And on the other side, they can either be one of the 3 resources, they can be a different type of building, or they can be a king or a queen. So there isn't that many different things to flip up. It's not like you flip up every single token. You have to look at a reference sheet to see what that token does. But you'll flip up those 3 tokens, and then you pick one token. It doesn't have to be one of the 3 that you flipped up, but you flip up 3 and pick one token, and that's when you sort of activate. If it's a resource, you take it. If it's a building thing, you place a building on there. But whenever you activate it, you activate all of that type that's available up on the board, right? So if I flip up 3 tokens and one of them's corn, I will pick up that corn plus every other corn that is face up that has been flipped up by a previous player. Because as the game goes on, if you're flipping up 3 and only activating 1 token, well, there's going to be a lot of face up tokens that are left available for other people to trigger when they trigger their, in sets, so to speak, when they trigger their token. Does that make sense? So again, if you were to trigger the resources, right, there's wood, corn, and sheep, I think. Yeah, I think that's about right. You will take all of that type of resource and you get points for having different sets, right? So for 1 sheep, 1 wood, and 1 corn, that's a set and that's 3 points. If you have a bunch of sheep and none of the other thing, well, that's not that great. So it's kind of interesting that they do it that way because you want to trigger a big poll, I guess you call it, of let's say sheep. Oh, hey, there's 5 sheep face up. All right, I'm going to take all 5 of these sheep. You kind of want to do that for each different type of resource, because just getting that one thing of a bunch of sheep is not terrible, I guess, because it's opportunity, so to speak, for later on. But that's not, oh, I just got 5 points. It's, ooh, I just got 5 third points, I guess you'd say. Then when you trigger the building ones, again, you don't take those tokens off the board like you do with the resources. You place your buildings on all of that type of building. There's 3 different types. There's one that looks kind of like a town. There's one that looks like a castle, and one that looks kind of like a church. So again, all of those that are face up and available, hey, I'm going to put one of my buildings there, one of my buildings there, and one of my buildings there, because they're all face up. And placing those buildings is sort of like a spatial element. You're trying to, if you can create a straight line between 2 little city areas on the board, you get points for that. If you can get a certain number, I think it's 3 and then 5 buildings in one little clump. You see the board is cut into, I think, 8 different colors. If you can get multiple buildings in one clump, you get a point. If you can get 1 building in each different clump, you'll get points that way. So there's both the set collection aspect of the resources and then this spatial element of placing the buildings out. There are also kings or queens, which are on there, which really just, I think when you take them, you get to place buildings. But they also, they're game end triggers. You start putting them down on these tracks, and once these tracks fill up, that'll trigger the end of the game. So it's mostly those 2 things, mostly set collection and the spatial aspect. Now, the spatial aspect has a couple different things, right? Because it's you want to connect cities together, you want to, go ham on one color, or you want to go on every different color. Oh, the only other thing I forgot to say is that there are fish so if you flip up and activate tokens that are on sort of these end port spaces, you can get a fish token, and the fish are just wilds for your completing of sets in your set collection thing with the resources. So that's pretty much how you play the game. I mean, normally we don't teach you all of the rules of the game, but now you could purchase this game and set it up and just skim through the rulebook real quick just to figure out, specific things. But that's it. It's a very simple game, very easy to teach. It's pretty quick to play. And, I enjoyed it. I didn't love it, but I did have a good time with it. But it's surprising how, at first I was it's going to be just a lot of random, right? I mean, if you're just flipping up tokens, you don't know what tokens you're flipping up. You could just somebody could totally just flip up 3 tokens and they're all awesome. They're all exactly what he wants. And there's others out there and stuff. But that doesn't happen all that often. And you will be surprised at how much, well, because when you flip up the tokens, sure, you don't know what's on the other side, but where you flip up is kind of important, especially for that spatial aspect of placing your buildings out, right? So it's kind of like controlled chaos, right? You have a little bit of power over that random, but you also do have some tough decisions sometimes where you're like, well, there's a decent amount of this type of token out there, I could trigger all those, and there's a decent amount of this token out there, I could trigger all those. Not only do I, have to figure out which one's better for me, but I don't want to leave that for another player. Because if I leave 5 coin out there, that means on their turn they could, in theory, flip up like 8, right? Because they could flip up 3 other tokens. I mean, there's some, I don't know what the piece limited, it's piece limited per different types. I don't know. If you go to the rulebook and count out how many there are, you can really, count cards, so to speak, in this type of game. But you shouldn't. It's very light and very quick, and it's a fun game. The only negative that I do have, well, I guess 2. One is setup. Setup does take a long time, right? Putting out there's like 100 something of these little squares that you put out there. I mean, obviously, I didn't even do it right now because I'm not gonna take this time just so you guys can see it on the board. I'll throw up some pictures for you. So setup does take a while. Teardown is pretty quick because you just dump everything, all these squares back into one bag. But yeah, setup is a little bit annoying. You kind of have to get everybody involved. Like, everybody grab these squares and throw them out there. Come on, let's do this. But it's actually surprisingly better at, so I always think 2 to 4 players, if the box is 2 to 4, 2 to 5, or 2 to 6. In those ranges, the 2-player is always not that great. And while this is true, I was under the impression that the 2-player game was going to be really cutthroat, right? Because there's a spatial aspect, and the only other person you're going to be blocking if you're going to be putting these buildings out there is this other player. So it's going to be really cutthroat. Well, the way that they adjust for number of players, they adjust the game. They don't adjust the board to make it smaller or anything. It's just how long the game is. The game will trigger, the game end will trigger earlier in a shorter player game, and in a longer player game, it'll last, a couple rounds longer. So that means that the board itself is still the same size when you're playing with 2 players. So you feel like you're cutting each other off even less. There's more area for you guys to spread around. You could completely, you take that half of the board, I take this half of the board, and you never really, feel like you're combating in any, you don't have combat. You never feel like you're really blocking each other or, getting up in each other's face in any way. In a 4-player game, it's really fun because every decision matters because, it's so much tighter. It's like, I really want to put in this space, but then I'm 1 space away from right here, and they could, and that's not enough. They could block me by just putting that 1 building right there, and then I don't have the connection that I really want. So 4 players is actually more cutthroat, and it is overall better. So this game follows that rule that I said with 2 to 4 players. 4 players is going to be better than 2 players, but kind of for a different reason. Normally in a 2-player game, when it goes 2 to 4, 2 players is really cutthroat. But here, it's less cutthroat and a little boring at 2. But if you're looking for a light and quick game that honestly, it's not like a kid's game, but I think younger kids could get it. It does say 14 plus on the box. That might have something to do with because there's these pointy plastic pieces or something. But I think it's pretty simple. I think a younger kid or definitely a newer gamer could definitely handle this. This could be, so again, not really a kid's game per se, not really an intro game per se, but I don't know, on the spectrum of kids games / intro games to hardcore games, it's kind of over here. If any of what I was talking about in this video sounds interesting to you, I am going to put a purchase link to this game in the description box down below. Go ahead and get yourself a copy. And while you're down there, don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you'll never be bored. Also, they gave you extra punch board. It says even here, don't punch these pieces. They are replacements if you lose some. Well, that's just nice.